Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Sylvia Knit Stuff. My name is Sylvia, I'm 35 years old, and I live right outside of Paris, France, and I'm here to talk to you about knitting today. For today's podcast, I've got a couple finished objects, a couple whips, and a couple, failures, frogged projects to discuss. After this, maybe sometime next week, I'd also like to get a sewing update filmed for you guys, for those of you who are interested in seeing what I've been sewing lately, because my sojo is kind of back. Let's get into the knitting then. My first finished object is the one that I'm wearing, and that I've been wearing a lot since I finished it. It's my funky Lakes pullover fade rainbow masterpiece. So the Lakes pullover is a pattern by Ozetta, aka Haley Smedley, and it is a top-down sweater that is knit starting from the saddles here on the shoulders, and then you pick up for the back, you knit the back, pick up for the front, and then you go on and you do the body, you pick up the sleeves, and pretty classic sweater construction. I think most people have seen this construction. It's been becoming pretty popular lately. I've been seeing, I feel like, more and more of them in my corner of the internet. So I knit a size large for this. However, I did not gauge swatch. I haven't even checked my gauge now after finishing. I knit a size, I think, medium for my husband 2 years ago, and I knit that with a worsted weight yarn as the pattern called for, and I hit gauge with the recommended needles. For this version, I held fingering weight double, so technically it's more of a DK weight than a worsted. And I did one size bigger than the one I did for him because I wanted it to be really oversized. I was really going for a sweatshirty vibe because I wanted something to throw on to go to yoga, to wear during Shavasana at the end of class, and to put it on after class and go back home. And it's been, serving that purpose. And my yoga teacher, Clara, she is super supportive of my knitting. She's always liking and commenting all my posts, and I love her. And so one day before class, I was like, yo, are you doing anything after class? Do you want to take some pictures of this sweater? And she was like, yes. So she was my little photographer and my artistic director. And was like, do this pose. No, and she would give me the adjustments, no, hold your shoulder back a little bit to try to get me nice and perfectly aligned. So I will insert some of the pictures from that little photo shoot. I personally had a lot of fun doing it, though some of it was actually quite difficult because when you're holding a position for a while and you're just starting to shake and you're look happy in the face, but in the body you are struggling. But I'm pretty happy with how the pictures came out. And I'm happy with how the sweater came out, and it's been working perfectly for its intended purpose. I did say that I held fingering weight double. I did use 6 different yarns, I think, in this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes. 6 different yarns. I think last time I listed all of them. I'm not going to do it again this time because it's just... If you're interested, you can watch my previous podcast, or you can check my Ravelry project, which I need to double check if I've updated it. But there's 6 different yarns, all from different dyers, different bases too, so it's kind of all over the place, but I think it's working. It started pilling a little bit under the sleeves, and I don't know if it's the position or if it's the yarn itself, but the green, I feel like the green and then this one here are pilling a lot more, but they were also the softest yarns to the touch, so it's not all that surprising. Here, the red rainbowy yarn and the blue rainbowy yarn have a lot less pilling happening, but it's also this is kind of near the forearm. This is doing more stuff, when I'm on the computer typing and all that, so it's rubbing more too. So I don't know what is to blame, but nothing too major so far. I finished it on January 19th. I didn't do a regular block. I just did a steam block because I finished it, and I think a day or two later I wanted to wear it to yoga. And before blocking, it was actually a little too short in the sleeves. And I was like, oh, I've done it again, haven't I? Because I have a tendency to make my sleeves too short. And after the steam block, they actually came out like the perfect length. They're not too short, but they're not too long, and I'm really happy with how they grew a little bit. Speaking of sleeves, so I was unsure of what to do when I got to the end of the fade. My original idea was to do all of the ribbing in purple like I did for the neckline, but as I knit along, I realized I was not going to have enough. I was not going to have enough purple to do the ribbing on the sleeves and on the bottom, especially for the bottom of the body, because the legs pullover has, I think, 4 inches of ribbing at the bottom of the body. And I had actually started knitting the bottom ribbing all in purple, but I had done something else with like the colors with the striping and I didn't like it, so I frogged all the way back, but I weighed my yarn and I had knit, I think, 5 inches of rib at the bottom. I don't remember exactly how much I had left, but I'm going to use like random numbers just for example. So I had, let's say, 40 grams before I started the body ribbing, and I had done 20 and I had done 50%, so like 2 inches of that ribbing, and then I had like 20 grams left. So I had used half of what I had just for half the body ribbing. So I knew that obviously if I hadn't done my sleeve ribbing yet, and I used all of my yarn for the body ribbing, it was gonna be a problem. So what I decided to do was do the reverse fade on the rib as well. So I just took the fade in, you know, the opposite direction, and I did that on the cuffs, but I did end with like a more purple than the other colors. And I did the same thing on the body. Again, with extra purple at the end. And I did Italian bind offs for everything. And I think it came out very nice, and I'm very happy. And it's a color chaotic, super fun sweater, and I can't stop wearing it. I've worn it so much since I finished it, like, it's getting out of control a little bit. My next finished object is one that I churned out in 2 days this week, and it's not really a specific pattern. It's this little hat. Let me put it on, though it's not blocked, so it's a little wonky. I cannot see how I am putting it on. Hopefully it is okay. And so for this hat, it's a mishmash modification extravaganza. I cast on the number of stitches for a size medium Oslo hat. Actually, let's rewind. Last podcast, you had seen that I had started a beanie with this yarn. This is some DK weight. This is some DK weight. This is some DK weight yarn from Hawari Bazaar. The colorway is Moon Rabbit, and it's like a DK weight sock yarn. And I had started the Severn Side Beanie by Annabelle Williams, and I was not sure if I wanted to continue. And I went back and forth, and I could not make up my mind. Like for a month or longer, I would just look at it and be like, yes. And then 2 seconds later, I would look at it and be like, no. And I eventually was like, it's gonna be frogged. Because if you can't make a decision either way, that means you don't like it that much either, I think. If every 2 seconds you're like, yeah, maybe I should frog this. And I had been knitting that hat on 3.25 millimeter needles. I think I had sized down because of the stitch count, comparing it to other hats I had knit. So I was knitting it on 3.25, and I decided to finally frog that this past Sunday. And I was like, oh, I'll make like an Oslo hat or like a modified Oslo hat like I've made a couple of before. And so I cast on for a size medium Oslo hat. And then I just kind of went freestyle. Like I did the folded brim, the technique from the Oslo hat, but my brim is much shorter than on the Oslo hat. And I just kind of like eyeballed it. Oh, there's someone throwing away a bunch of glass. So I just kind of eyeballed it for the brim. I knit a certain amount of stockinette. I kind of folded and I was like, yeah, I think that'll work. I didn't want it to be like a super tall hat, because my problem with the tall hats that have kind of like space above your head is that they eventually end up falling in my eyes, and that drives me insane. So I did make the body of the hat shorter, and then after I did the folding, I was like, you know what, I don't think I want to do just plain stockinette. And I looked at the Hipster hat pattern, which is also another petite knit, and I was like, is the number of stitches that I have, does it match up with any of the sizes of the Hipster hat? If so, I can switch to 2x2 rib and then do those crown decreases instead, you know, for minimal mathing. And it was the case. So the medium size Oslo hat has you cast on the same number of stitches as the woman and man sizes of the Hipster hat. I knit 2x2 rib for I don't even know how much until I decided that I was over. And then I did the Hipster hat decreases. And I knit this in 2 days. And I think that was my brain telling me like, girl, you are tired, you want simplicity, yet all of my other projects are like a lot more complicated. So I just couldn't put this one down. Like I started and I was like, hat, which is very funny in comparison to what I had previously been knitting with this yarn, where it was just kind of like dragging on and I couldn't decide either way. And then when I finally made my decision, this was just like, boom, so fast. Then I have one more finished object-ish, like she's finished, but she's not. You'll see. I need a chicken, I need a chicken. As you can see, I knit the famous emotional support chicken, and she is finished, but she is not. All of the knitting of the chicken is done. I have the polyfill required to stuff it. However, I have no safety eyes, so I started sewing the chicken together. Like the tail is sewed shut. I sewed the what's it called? Is it the crest, the crown, and the wattle onto the chicken, and sewed part of the front together. But I can't sew the rest of it together until I've got the eyes in. And a friend of mine told me, she's like, hey, if you can wait a little bit, I can bring you the eyes to the next Tricot bière, our bidding, beer and knitting night, bidding. And I said, yeah, sure, I want to knit a second chicken too, so would you mind bringing me 2 pairs? And she was like, yep, no problem. So next Tuesday, I will get the eyes for this Miss Chicken, and then I will be able to stuff her and finish sewing her shut, but she is more or less done. I feel like everyone has seen this pattern. It has definitely been a bit of a viral pattern, and I've been wanting to knit a ridiculous chicken for a while. The designer is called Annette Corsino, and the pattern was very clear. It was easy to follow. I used scraps for my yarn. You might recognize the green because I used it very recently. This is the Rerum Natura yarn that I used in my husband's sweater. It's Gilliatt in the colorway Emeraude. Then for this darker purple, it's from Campolmi Filati, and the base is called Sport, but it's actually a worsted weight. Don't ask me why. And it's the color, I think, number 38. Then for these stripes here, it is scraps from the second sweater I ever finished knitting, I think, or the third, one of my very early sweaters. It's from Rico Design. It's the Essential Soft Merino Aran in colorway 71. Then for the red bits, I used the yarn from my husband's beanie. It's Mota from Wool Dreamers in the colorway Burdeos, I believe, which is Bordeaux in Spanish, like the city. And for the beak, I just used some cotton from Zostrin Gren. It is technically like a heavy fingering weight cotton, so I held 2 strands together, and I think it worked just fine. So yeah, and she needs a name. I feel like I've named her twice, but I keep forgetting what I name her, so she is still nameless. If you have any ideas for chicken names, let me know. What should she be named? I didn't check my swatch. I didn't check my gauge on this or anything. I was like, whatever, it's a chicken. In the pattern, she says it just needs to be dense enough that you can't see the filling. And I think like if I place my hand here, you can't really see my hand. So I think we're good. The pattern, the construction was interesting. It was amusing to knit. You basically start doing 1/2 of the tail. You cast on a certain number of stitches, and then you kind of do some short rows here, you cast on stitches, and then you cast on more, and then you do more short rows, and you do it again a third time, different numbers each time. And then you do exactly the same thing on one side, and then you either use a crochet hook, which is what I did, or a sewing, like a tapestry needle, to sew the two halves of the tail together. And then you pick up all along here, and then the rest of it is knit in this direction, like that. You have, it's all knit in garter stitch, so it's super simple, though you do need to do quite a few sections of short rows, but it's really easy and really intuitive because you're usually just like knitting your short row stitch and then like one more, or I think in one section it's 3 more, but it's not complicated. It's wrap and turn short rows, which I never do, but it was really easy with the garter stitch. I think I've done wrap and turn short rows on one project before, ever. At first I was like, oh no, it's a different technique, and then I was like, Sylvia, just do it, it's not that hard. And then I was like, yeah, it wasn't that hard. But there are short rows like here in this part, here to create the chicken breast. You've got short rows also on the head here, there, and then these little pieces are also knit separately and they're sewed on, but it's, as someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy sewing her knits together, it was really not that bad. And sewing together the chicken here, like the color changes actually really help you line up your sewing and help you get going quite easily. Like if your chicken was all one color, it might be like a teeniest bit more difficult to see, where to line up what, but it's really not that hard. Oh yeah, I think that's enough for Miss Chicken. Hopefully next time I come see you guys, she will be eyeballed and stuffed and, I don't know, just living her best chicken life. I do want to knit another chicken as a gift for someone. So maybe there will be also a second chicken along with her next time. I finished the Scrappy DK weight socks that I was working on last time. I was still on the first sock last episode, and these socks I kind of used a pattern, but I kind of didn't at the same time. My friend Camille has a free pattern for DK weight socks and a video tutorial here on YouTube. Her username is Woolen Sun. She usually only makes videos in French, but she did the tutorial in English as well if you're interested in knitting DK weight socks. But I just used her pattern to determine the number of stitches to cast on, and then I kind of went freestyle until the toe, and then I looked again at her pattern for the toe. This is like a scrappy sock with lots of different minis and scraps. I think I need to double check for this and for these that I've got all my yarns updated on Ravelry. If you're interested in knowing what is in here, I'm going to edit that right after filming this so I don't forget. But it's just a DK weight sock, nothing too crazy. Starting with 10 rounds of 2x2 rib and then 50 rounds of this situation where I did some like 6x2 separated by 2x2, if that makes any sense. I have also been wearing these quite a bit, so they're a little pilly and the heels are starting to rub and pill a bit already. But yeah, they're nice and thick and cozy. And I do think last time I told you guys that I wasn't enjoying the knitting process so much, which is why I had kind of stopped and put them on pause, because I cast on the first sock, I think like the end of November or beginning of December, and I knit most of the first sock in just a few days. But I found that I was holding a lot of tension in my arms. I don't know if it was the small circumference with the kind of thicker yarn or what it was, but I just felt like I was very tense and it was almost hurting. It was quite uncomfortable. And so I put the project aside. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore right now. But then like last week or the week before, I was like, let's just finish the first sock. It's almost done. I think I was on the very last stripe on the foot. And so I was like, okay, just finish the first sock, cast on the second. You knit the first one mainly in like 2 days, so you can get the second one done quickly too. However, I did try to relax a little bit into the knitting of the second sock, and there were consequences. The first sock, when I first tried it on, it actually felt a little small. It was quite tight and it was a little bit too short, like wearable, but I would have liked maybe like a round or two more. And then for the second one, I definitely relaxed because I didn't want to deal with that like horrific tension. And because I was doing the stripes, I couldn't just like knit a different number of rounds. And I wasn't even thinking about the tension. Like I knew that if I relaxed, it would probably end up being a little bit bigger, which is what happened. Like here you can see sock number 2 is just a little bit longer. Not by a whole lot, but still wearable. But it's a problem that I have with socks. I think sometimes when I knit socks, I must be super tense, and then other times I'm not. And so I've got a couple different pairs of socks that are kind of different lengths from the other, which is kind of making me think maybe I should start trying to knit socks 2 at a time, which maybe I will do with my next pair. We'll see. Now let's move on to whips. Last time I showed you some vanilla socks, some like stripy vanilla socks I was knitting. And I had finished the first sock, but I hadn't Kitchenered the toe, and so now the toe has been Kitchenered. And I had just finished the cuff on the second sock. And these socks, they're knit in yarn from Artemis Yarns in her sock base with 3 different colors from her Aquatic Summer collection. There's Deep Sea, there is Coral Reef, and there is Bioluminescent. And so last time I had just finished the cuff, and I was about to start the leg, and I promptly put this project down and did not touch it for weeks. And then I think last week I was like, let's work on some socks, because I also promised a friend a pair of socks. So I was like, I gotta get these done before I start the other ones. And I knit the whole leg, and I was starting to separate my stitches for the heel and counting, you know, to make sure I had 30 on one side and 30 on the other. And what happened? What do I realize? I have 30 on the front and 29 on the back. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? I know I cast on the right number of stitches, because if not, I wouldn't have been able to do a 1x1 rib if I had 59 stitches. Like, it wouldn't work. So I was like, I must have dropped a stitch somewhere. Where did I drop the stitch? It was literally dropped on the last row of ribbing. I attempted to take a very tiny crochet hook and work it up, but because this is knit with stripes and lots of changing colors, I think it makes it even more difficult to do it. And just, I was like, oh God, I can't do this for 60 rounds. It's going to take forever. It's going to be a struggle, and I just don't want to do it. And then I was like, what are my options? Either I can secure the drop stitch, throw in an increase now, and just keep on going, or I could frog all the way back to the cuff and reknit the leg. And I think that's what I'm going to do, honestly, because I know I could just secure the drop stitch and keep on going, but I feel like it's gonna bother me in my ridiculous little brain. It's gonna be like, no, this sock is wrong. You need to fix it. It is not good. So technically then, we're exactly in the same place as I was last time for this sock. I have 2 new cast-ons to share with you guys today also. First of all, I have a shawl. Since I finished 2 shawls recently, I cast on another one. And this pattern is Linya by Bérangère Caillot, French designer. I'd never knit any of her patterns, but this is a shawl that I saw ages ago, and I just remember seeing the really geometric slip stitch motif and just absolutely loving it. And the sample is knit in just like a cream, like undyed, I think. And so for the longest time, I was like, I think maybe I will knit it in this yarn. So this is clearly not an undyed. It's got color going on in there, but it's, you know, it's a natural base with some speckles. And this yarn has been bopping around my stash for ages too. It is from Fios da Fazenda. Fios da Fazenda is a Brazilian brand that I bought when Luis and I went to Brazil to go like meet his mom and his family after they finally opened the borders during, you know, COVID and the pandemic and stuff. So yeah, this is from I think 2020 or 2021, and it's currently 2025. I think 2021 maybe is when I bought it. And this is a sock yarn, but there's one thing that's a little different about it than other sock yarns. It says it's a 3-ply. Usually sock yarns are either 4-ply or a high twist 2-ply. So just a little something different, a little interesting, but I feel like it still looks quite similar to a 4-ply. The colorway is called Bolero. And the shawl, I haven't gotten super far on the shawl. I feel, I don't know, a certain kind of way about the pattern. The way that it's formatted, it's like in a table, so it's very easy to read and find where you are. But I almost wish it was a little bit more concise. I wish it was a little bit more concise. Let me explain. So this is knit and garter stitch with slip stitches, and you've got an applied I-cord border going on the sides. And because there's these funky geometric shapes, you're increasing and decreasing kind of like here or here on the sides as well. And it's knit from one, like I think it's supposed to be like this. So it's knit kind of going sideways. Obviously it's going to be much bigger. It's a 2-skein shawl. It's subdivided into sections. And so I did the first section and now I'm in the second section. And basically you're like knitting, and I don't remember exactly. Sometimes you're increasing or decreasing at the beginning and at the end. And then you usually have an increase here. And so when you increase here, it's going to affect the number of stitches you have here, right? And instead of saying, you know, repeat your increases, blah, 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 like it goes really row by row. And I feel like that makes the pattern really long. It's like, I think 15 pages when it's not really that, I guess, complicated of a pattern to knit. And there's also one thing that she does that I think it's to kind of save space. But at the same time, if you had just copied and pasted those into there, it would have taken just as much space. Where in section 2, for example, she constantly references you back to rows 3 and 5. And rows 3 and 5 are exactly the same in section 2, except one of them has a decrease at the end, I think, and the other one doesn't. And I can never remember which one is which. So I end up having to scroll up like 2-3 pages every time, like, oh right, that's the one with the decrease. So between every single row being written out, like if you really want your hand held, I think it's really good for that. Because, you know, there's no doubt, there's no like, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't like having to be so glued to the pattern, because I don't know when she's gonna change the motif. Like, what if I just keep on going, and then I realize I messed up at some point. So every time, like, okay, is this row the same as the other? Just there's like the one extra stitch from the increase. Yes, okay. So I have to. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense. It makes sense in my head, but the pattern is clear. It's just maybe not formatted in my favorite kind of way. I am knitting this on 3.25 millimeter needles. The pattern does call for 3.5, but I wanted to use my 5-inch Chowgoos. So my 2 pairs of 5-inchers, I don't know where they are. They're off living their life. So I just grabbed the 3.25 and I figured it would make a huge difference. It does have a fairly tight gauge, like 26 stitches. I have not checked my gauge. But I also was like, it's probably not the worst thing ever if I go down 1 needle size, because then maybe I won't run out of yarn. I mean, hopefully I won't run out of yarn. We shall see. Then I have a new cast on that I started technically yesterday, I think. For now, it just looks like this. So this is going to become the Fouetté Cardigan by Celine Phaeton. And you start by knitting 2 saddles with 3x3 cables. The cables are mirrored, so you do right cables on one side and left on the other, and then you pick up along the cables. So as of now, it doesn't really look like much, but it's kind of like that part. It's the same kind of construction as the Lakes pullover. The yarn that I'm using is from Lain'amourée. And this is her Cassiope base, which I'm a little confused about the composition. If you look on Ravelry, it says that this is an 80% merino, 20% nylon, and 5% Stellina base. But on the tag that I have here, it says it's 75% merino, 20% silk, and 5% Stellina. So I don't know if Ravelry is not correct or if she made any changes to the base. But I mean, it does feel like it might have silk in it because it is very soft, but you also have merino sock yarns that feel like this too, so I'm not sure. And the colorway is Dans le panier de la lavandière. And then I'm using the matching mohair also. So it's this very light lavender, very beautiful color with a little bit of sparkle from the Cassiope. It's a really nice tonal, like there is a bit of variation, but it's not like variegated. So it definitely has a bit of depth without being like too wild. Not that I'm afraid of that, obviously. And for this, I don't have a gauge swatch to show you guys. I kind of did a lazy swatch, something that you like probably shouldn't do, but I was like, whatever. So I did a swatch in stockinette because in the pattern, she gives you a couple different swatches, like 20 by 26 in stockinette. And then I don't remember what the other ones were, but there was also like a gauge for the big cable pattern. I decided to size down my needles already because I was like, I don't think I'm gonna get that gauge on 4.5 with this yarn. And so I swatched on 4 millimeters instead of 4.5. I knit a decent chunk of stockinette and measured it. I didn't wash it, I frogged my swatch already. I mean, whatever. Hopefully I won't regret this. Usually it turns out okay. But my gauge on my swatch was like 20.5. I was like, I think that should be okay. It's kind of a loose fitting cardigan anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. The one thing I am a little bit worried though is the length of these saddles, but looking at it, I think it's okay actually compared to the Lakes pullover. I don't know, they do seem quite long, and you don't have a gauge for just this plain cable, so I can't really check if it's the right row gauge, and she doesn't give you a measurement in the pattern either of how long your saddles should be, which would be nice to have so I could maybe like remove some cabling if necessary to shorten it. I am knitting a size 3 of this pattern, and usually I knit a size like 4 or large in most patterns, but I think the 3 is the recommended size. And looking at the project pictures and the pictures of people on Ravelry, I find that it's an oversized cardigan, but if you make it too big, it just doesn't look good. Like this, because the sleeves are quite big, and so it just becomes a little too potato sacky. So hopefully it will be okay. I struggled knitting these saddles, not because the technique itself, like these are basic 3x3 cables, but the thing is you only have 8 stitches on your needles and you're using most of them to cable. And so with something slippery like merino and mohair, like it just felt like I had butter fingers, like trying to not drop my stitches, and it was definitely a struggle. I mean, obviously I did it, it's okay, but it wasn't the easiest of things to do. Maybe if I had used wooden needles, it would have been less slip and slidey. But it was definitely, like, I think that's worth mentioning that doing the cables on this tiny strip of knitting was not super fun, but I think it looks cute. And also the pattern is like, it's a very, I guess, modern knitting pattern with lots of information. So if you want to, you know, try out maybe a more complex pattern with cables and lace, and you're a bit scared to get started, I think this might be a good place to start, because she's got tons of diagrams, tons of pictures, tons of explanations. Like you even have a file with progress charts, which I don't think I'm going to use honestly, but you can like check off every single row that you've knit. There are diagrams like at the beginning of the pattern. You have like, this is how this part looks, this is how this part looks, like all the different steps of how the cardigan looks during its creation. I mean, I'll insert some footage here. I just filmed my screen a little bit so you can see. I'm not going to show you the actual pattern, obviously, but I think you can see the images and see how that might help some people to understand what is happening. So yeah, I'm excited. I think this is going to be super cute. I love this color. I love the sparkle, and I just hope I have like the mental capacity to work on it, because lately I've been tired and I haven't been wanting to knit complex things, but like almost everything I've got going on is a little complicated. So hopefully I can find the brain power to work on that. I also said I wanted to talk about some failures, about some frogged projects, and I already talked about the beanie. So I frogged the Sever Inside beanie. And last time I showed you guys a test knit that I was working on, a test knit that I have since dropped out of because I was having some major fit issues, and none of the options like were really working for me, I felt. So I decided like this is the end for me and this pattern, and I let the designer know and she said it was okay. But it was the Burnt Umber by Kelsey Garner. So it's a bottom up raglan, which I had never knit before. And I had finished, I was going to crop it, and I had finished the body. And so that was on hold. And I started the first sleeve. In the group chat on Instagram, people were talking about, oh, maybe I'll size up a needle because I don't want my sleeves to be too tight. And there was one person who had issues with sleeve fit, and she was like, this is fitting like a second skin. This is super uncomfortable. Proactively, I decided to go up a needle size in relation to what I had used on the body here. And I got through a good chunk of the sleeve, and then I decided to try it on. This was a horrible feeling on my arm. Like, this is so tight on my arm. And especially like if I bend my elbow and I feel all of the floats from the slip stitches, I just like absolutely hated the feeling. And I was like, if I want to wear a cardigan, I want to be able to wear it maybe with something with sleeves underneath. You know, I don't want it to be skin tight. And what Kelsey, the designer, had said, she said, you can go up as many needle sizes as you want to give it a comfortable fit. But I was like, okay, if I want this to be a little bit loose, I'm gonna have to go up, I think, quite a few needle sizes. And then the problem is that the gauge will be radically different from the body. And I found that there was already like a minor difference in gauge from having gone up a needle size for the sleeve. And I just didn't want to have a huge difference in gauge between the sleeve and the body. And then the other option was to go up a sleeve size or two, and then to decrease them out in the raglan. But I've also never knit a top-down raglan, and I was just like, I don't understand how this works. And I think I maybe misunderstood, and I thought you had to decrease the extra stitches out before you start attaching them, but I think you decrease them out during the raglan. But I was just worried that if I had to decrease out stitches, then it would make the fit at the top of the arm and the shoulder way too tight, which after seeing how this fit, I was definitely worried about the fit in the top of the raglan too. I still think the pattern is really cool, and she has rewritten, I think. She rewrote part of the raglan. I'm not sure if she's going to rewrite the sleeves or anything, but I think she's taken that feedback from a couple of us who had issues with the sleeve and is going to maybe add some notes to the pattern or give some different options. I'm going to frog this with this yarn, but part of me is like, maybe someday I can knit an oversized DK weight cropped version of this pattern. I think that could be really cool, but I would definitely have to knit a much larger size, maybe use like a bit of a bigger needle too. This was just not my thing. And I think also last time I mentioned that the slip stitch pattern was kind of uncomfortable. Like maybe it was the way I was holding my needles, but I felt like it was causing discomfort in my shoulders. So between that and the fit issues, I was just like, me and this pattern, we're not meant to be at this moment in time with this yarn. But I hadn't frogged it yet, so I could show it to you guys. Now I can show it and frog it and put this yarn back in stash. I have a sort of acquisition also today, just one. I've actually really chilled out on buying yarn. I think I didn't buy any yarn in November, none in December, none in January. Well, technically La Bien-Aimée, I think they're still doing it, like this big warehouse sale, and La Bien-Aimée is very expensive. If you are not familiar with it, it's usually like, I don't know, at least in France, it's like 10 to 15 euros more expensive than almost every other hand-dyed yarn. And when I saw that they were doing a warehouse sale with bases like Gilliatt on sale, I was like, maybe just a little bit. So I ordered a little bit of that, of the Gilliatt, and then I also ordered some Wandering Flock yarn, because I really loved the baby paca base that I bought one skein of a while ago and knit myself a little scarf out of that. So I bought a couple skeins of the baby paca that was also on sale and some Gilliatt. However, I have not received that yet. But other than that, in the past like 3-4 months, that's all the yarn I've bought except for this. It was my friend Michelle's birthday in January, and I told her for her birthday present we could go to Lil Weasel and she could pick out a skein of whatever yarn she wanted, and I would make her whatever accessory she wanted. So like, I wasn't saying, yo, pick out whatever you want, I'll make you a sweater. That's a little too much work. But I said, you know, if you want a hat or some fingerless gloves or a shawl or a scarf or socks or whatever, let me know and we can figure that out. So we met up last week, and we went to Lil Weasel and she fell in love with this skein of yarn. It's from Gilliatt. She is a French dyer and she has a collection specially for Lil Weasel, and it has this cute little label. It says Parisienne. And there's like a whole wall of her yarns in the store. And she picked this color, which is called Oh La La. And I asked her, I was like, what do you want? And she was like, you know, I want a pair of socks, but I kind of wanted fingerless mitts too, but I think I want socks more. And I was like, I'm gonna knit you a pair of socks and then I'll see what I can do about the mitts, because I know that I don't need a full skein for a pair of socks. I don't know exactly how much I would need for fingerless mitts. I don't know, like I know that I can get a pair of shorty socks and regular socks out of a skein of yarn often, so maybe I can get a pair of socks and a pair of fingerless mitts out of this. We'll see. I might maybe use a mini for the ribbing. Who knows? So once I finish my aquatic summer socks that I have to frog back to the cuff, this will hit the needle as well. Okay. I think I've got 3 kind of active whips that I just showed you guys. And I'm thinking of bringing a couple back into rotation, but like the other whips that I showed you in the last podcast, I believe, I have not touched them. But I think I'm gonna see if I can bring the tessellated vest and the chained oblivion cardigan back into the rotation, but I make no promises. But I've got them here sitting next to me, like, maybe you want to work on these now. So yeah, okay. Thank you for watching today. I hope you had a nice time looking at pretty yarn and pretty knits with me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you are not subscribed yet and you want to keep seeing my videos, and drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you were working on when you were watching this. I'm always curious. I'd always like to know, maybe, you know, maybe I can discover some amazing new pattern that I've never seen before and that I just absolutely have to knit. Or if you have any advice on, I don't remember what questions I asked. Oh, can you get a pair of socks and fingerless mitts out of a skein of fingering weight? I think there was another question that I was wondering about, but I have completely forgotten. Anyway, have a great day. Happy knitting. Bye.